This week on Government Matters.
Over the last 6 months, we've really been looking at sort of what our stakeholders want. And what they've expressed loud and clear is that they want our core services to be as effective and fast as possible.
FedRAMP Forward Part 2. After a 6-month review, FedRAMP has a plan to address industry concerns that the approval process is too long, too expensive, and too opaque.
There's a lot of work to be done, and DHS is, I think, acknowledging that.
It's been 3 months since CISA was signed into law, but Homeland Security is still trying to work out the kinks in privacy. We get a progress report.
We need to really focus on the responsibility and accountability for our work and not trust a bunch of reviews.
After a very public construction scandal, Veterans Affairs is trying to improve its procurement process. We host their Mr. Fix-It. Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
To our viewers around the world on the American Forces Network and here in the nation's capital, thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every week we'll bring you the top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. Just over 15 years ago, Kevin Gallagher launched a Reston, Virginia-based startup called Simulyze. He had one goal in mind: create a visualization tool to give DoD operational intelligence. Simulyze just expanded that platform to the commercial drone market. Government Matters takes a closer look. In 2000, Kevin Gallagher started work on an air, ground, and maritime visualization tool that gave DoD a real picture of operating space.
We saw a real gap in a capability to be able to do operational intelligence, to be able to bring in lots of real-time data, put it together into one environment, and so in real time you can make decisions and be able to support operations.
We have a gimbaled camera here that allows us to search the areas visually from the air.
The proliferation of unmanned aerial systems has opened entirely new markets to operational intelligence, like the agriculture industry, first responders, or retail delivery.
We think there's a lot of broad applicability across the government and the commercial marketplaces.
Enter the Federal Aviation Administration. That agency is trying to figure out how to integrate drones safely into U.S. airspace. Gallagher says operational intelligence can help.
You want to be able to fly beyond line of sight. You want to be able to do bigger and broader operations. And we think the data and being able to have complete situational awareness of what's around you, other aircraft, obstacles, what the weather is. The camera is coming out of the front.
Drones are loaded with cameras and sensors that collect images, GPS data, and flight statistics. That data can be integrated with other sources of data, like obstacles, air traffic, or the weather, to offer real-time analysis. Programs like Amazon's plan for package delivery depend on it. The challenge? Sifting through all that data. It could become overwhelming.
Everything's connected. That's data, and there's a lot of data available, and how do you deal with that quantity of data, and how do you use that information for making good choices and efficient business decisions, for example.
The FAA has several drone projects in the works. This week, their drone registration system passed 400,000 signups, and Administrator Michael Huerta spoke at South by Southwest. On April 1st, their rulemaking committee will issue a report on micro-drones. It could determine whether or not small unmanned aircraft systems will be allowed to fly over other people. In Tech Matters, FedRAMP Forward Part 2. In December of 2014, the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program published a 2-year action plan called FedRAMP Forward. They wanted to integrate cloud solutions with a trusted internet connection environment and rise to meet the challenges posed by high-impact systems. It was an ambitious agenda, especially for an office with only a handful of team members. But recently, FedRAMP has come under fire. Critics say the approval process is too long, too expensive, and too opaque. They're calling for change. Enter FedRAMP Forward Part 2. For more, I'm joined by Matt Goodrich, FedRAMP Director from the General Services Administration's Office of Citizen Services. Matt, I know you've explained this program thousands of times, but for our audience, it bears repeating. What is FedRAMP and how does it work?
FedRAMP's a program for the federal government that makes sure that the government standardizes the way that we authorize cloud computing services for use across the government. Our motto is do once, use many times. Since cloud environments are used the same no matter what the customer is, it's important that we make sure that we authorize them consistently so that we don't duplicate our efforts, but also make sure that we keep the security bar high so that we can protect federal information, which is of the utmost importance.
Now, before we get to FedRAMP Forward Part 2, let's address some of this criticism. In January, Meritalk published a position paper called Fix FedRAMP and outlined concerns from cloud service providers about speed, cost, and transparency. This month, they published an article about complaints that your office issued veiled threats of retaliation against companies that spoke out. Here's an excerpt. Organizations have received calls from the PMO, Program Management Office, questioning why they have engaged in the Fix FedRAMP initiative and inferring that this participation will be bad for their FedRAMP business. Now, are any of these complaints justified?
They're simply untrue. I don't have enough time to make calls like that anyway. And our success as FedRAMP is as equally as successful for us as a program as it is for our vendors. So anything that we can do to help our vendor community get through FedRAMP is what we are here to do. We spent the last 6 months actually going out and talking to over 80 stakeholders, including cloud providers, our third-party assessors, and industry in general. So we've really been trying to make sure that we are actively out there, and those allegations are simply untrue.
Matt, Meritalk also reports some people are privately calling for your removal. Do you have any plans to step down?
I do not. I've been working hard at FedRAMP for a while, and I'm confident in my ability to lead this program and think we're doing great work and are incredibly successful so far. All
right, let's move on to FedRAMP Forward Part 2. Last week, you published a detailed plan on FedRAMP.gov. It includes some success stories. Here are a few. A 340% increase in enrollees from 500 to 1,700. A 50% increase in authorizations from 40 to 60. A redesign of the Joint Authorization Board to make provisional authorizations happen in under 6 months. So what's the plan, Matt? How will FedRAMP move forward?
So we're going to be having an event on March 28th, actually called FedRAMP Accelerated. As you mentioned in your intro, we put out a pretty aggressive plan about a year and a half ago, going over where we'd like to go over the next 2 years. And over the last 6 months, we've really been looking at sort of what our stakeholders want. And what they've expressed loud and clear is that they want our core services to be as effective and fast as possible. So we've spent the last 3 months going through and doing a redesign of the way that we do our authorizations. We've had such a heavy focus on making sure that security is not traded for speed, so that rigor maintains the level that we want to see. But now it's time to see how fast we can make it, as well as keeping that rigor as high as possible. And so we've gone through a redesign process that we're excited to go out to industry and share on the 28th. We'll be having it at GSA's headquarters downtown. And there's parts of it that we'll still need to sort of finalize, but we're excited to partner with industry to make sure all the final details are there, but we're ready to reveal it and show how we can make those authorizations happen in under 6 months.
Matt, you were very candid about FedRAMP's limitations. Here's a passage from your blog. We looked at our initial FedRAMP Forward plan. In reviewing it, we came to the conclusion it was overly aggressive. We were trying to boil the ocean. Does bandwidth have anything to do with this? Meaning, would the ocean be boiling if you had more people?
Sure. I mean, if you have more people, the more work you can do, right? But I think for us, when we look at what FedRAMP's trying to achieve, we really want to focus on specifically what it is that our customers need from us. And we were trying to do a whole lot. We were trying to harmonize industry standards. We were trying to launch a bunch of working groups. We were trying to do a whole lot of things, when specifically what our customers have said they want is they want more authorizations, and they want it to happen faster, and they want to know how they can engage with the program to make sure it's a government-wide program. So that's really what our key focus is going to be on over the next few months, and continue to do our customer outreach so that we know that we're keeping a pulse on what everyone wants and that we're effectively meeting what everyone's expectations are of the program.
Last week on Government Matters, we hosted Mike Hettinger and Rich Butel. They're working behind the scenes on a bill to complement FITARA called the Cloud IT Act. It has an entire title dedicated to FedRAMP. Have you read it? Will it help?
I have. I think that part of that bill would be helpful if it actually addressed what FedRAMP is. But in general, I think there's some good elements to that bill, and I'm excited to see where it could go.
Matt Goodrich, FedRAMP Director. Thanks for answering all the tough questions, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Let's take a look now at this week's CIO Shuffle. Federal News Radio reports Deputy Federal Chief Information Officer Lisa Schlosser will serve a short-term detail as acting CIO at the Office of Personnel Management. Last month, Donna Seymour retired from that position under pressure by Republicans in Congress. Federal News Radio also reports Homeland Security Deputy CIO Margie Graves will fill in for Schlosser on an interim basis. It's unclear how long the details will be at each agency. FCW reports John G. Edwards will succeed Doug Wolf as the Chief Information Officer for the Central Intelligence Agency. Edwards has a mix of government and private sector experience. His resume includes work at the CIA and Accenture. We'll turn from tech to management straight ahead on Government Matters. A few years back, major construction projects for the Department of Veterans Affairs were a mess. Cost overruns and delays were par for the course. The agency called in a heavy hitter. His plans to improve procurement next. In April of 2013, the Government Accountability Office published an eye-opening report. It studied some of the largest medical facility construction projects of the Department of Veterans Affairs. The list of cities included Denver, Las Vegas, New Orleans, and Orlando. Compared to initial estimates, cost increases at those projects ranged from 66 to 427%, and delays ranged between 14 and 86 months. Not a great track record, but now the VA is trying to forge a new path, and it starts with procurement. Joining me is the man leading that effort, Gregory Giddens, Executive Director at the VA's Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction. Greg, you've earned a singular reputation in the world of government procurement. About a decade ago, you led the Secure Border Initiative through the political gauntlet at DHS. Last year, you took the VA job amid a very public construction scandal in Boulder. All right, tell me, why are you attracted to these kinds of projects? Are you a glutton for punishment?
I just can't resist trying to make a difference. I think it's a great opportunity to engage, in particular the mission at the VA and serving our veterans is something that's very compelling.
Now, your office released a memo in December on 5 key foundational elements designed to improve procurement within Veterans Affairs. Give us the basics.
Well, the basics of this memo was to really identify functional areas that we need to focus on as we improve as part of the MyVA initiative at the department to better serve veterans and their families, as well as better engagement with our employees. And the issues that we talked about was owning your work. We need to really focus on the responsibility and accountability for our work and not trust a bunch of reviews to make sure there's goodness in the process. We talked about moving to a principles-based organization instead of being rules-based. We also talked about engagement with industry. We need to have better engagement with industry, more productive dialogue with industry. We also talked about the efforts that we have underway, that we need to procure less and order more. We need to streamline the process and take the transactional activity out so that we can better engage the market and leverage our buying power. And lastly, we need to collaborate. Procurement's a team sport. We can't do it by ourselves.
All sounds great. And Greg, earlier this year you told Federal News Radio the VA is not setting a budget or schedule for construction projects until 30% of the design work is completed. Why not?
Well, one of the things we found out, and you mentioned the prior GAO studies, when you put out an estimate way early in the process and you haven't done site selection, you haven't done any design work, it's really like you and I trying to estimate what it's going to cost to build a house, and we don't know if it's a 3-bedroom ranch or a 6-bedroom colonial. We really need to get enough information to know what we're designing before we put out estimates.
All right, makes sense. Now let's talk about the Army Corps of Engineers. In the future, do you see them playing a larger role in VA construction projects or being supplanted entirely by the private sector?
I see them playing a key role for us, and I've had the opportunity in prior organizations to work with the Army Corps and found them to be an excellent partner. So as we enter this new relationship with the Corps from the Department of Veterans Affairs, we do see them being a key player and a key partner for us moving forward.
Secretary Bob McDonnell and Deputy Secretary Sloan Gibson were classmates at West Point and business partners in the private sector. They want to incorporate that mentality into the VA's DNA. I would imagine they run a pretty tight ship. How is it working under them?
They run a tight ship indeed. But it's working great. They're really bringing, through the MyVA initiative, a new lens for us at the department, where we're really putting the veteran first. We're trying to focus on the veteran, how they would view the VA, looking at an organization from the outside in, much like the veteran would do, not from the inside out. And realizing our bureaucracy sometimes even getting in the way of providing great experience for our veterans and a way to engage and empower our workforce.
We wish you all the best with this. Gregory Giddens, Executive Director of the VA's Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.
You can hear more from Giddens this coming Tuesday at Acquisition Excellence 2016. The conference, put on by IAC, runs from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Grand Hyatt in Washington, D.C. And we'll turn from management to security matters straight ahead. In security matters, working out the privacy kinks in CISA. Last December, Congress passed and President Obama signed the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act. It creates a new information sharing regime between the private sector and the Department of Homeland Security. This week, DHS released a privacy assessment. Here to break it down is Sean Lyngaas, staff writer for FCW. All right, Sean, refresh our collective memory. What is CISA and what did it accomplish?
CISA is the Cyber Information Sharing Act of 2015. It's a bill that lawmakers were trying to pass in some form for several years. What it does is it removes liabilities for private sector companies to share information with the government on potential cyber threats, so that these companies won't get sued for disclosing personal information of their clients. So it took away a big impediment, the supporters of the bill say, to information sharing, but it also drew the ire, as it always has, of privacy advocates who worry that this is a disproportionate sharing of information that doesn't result in a protecting against cyber threats.
I'm going to follow up on that point later, Sean, but from your reporting, it appears the execution of this law is a work in progress. DHS is still adjusting something called the Automated Indicator Sharing Program. Tell us more.
Right. The AIS is basically implementing the law and formalizing the process, which was already there to share information threats. And DHS periodically does privacy assessments of how well privacy is being protected in the sharing of this threat information. And the first major assessment after CISA was passed, which was released this week, found that there is still some, quote, residual personally identifiable information not related to cyber threats that could be being shared. They're trying to fix that, but as you probably know, that's not going to sound good to privacy advocates. Lots of groups in and around Washington who have been very vocal about the measures that are in this law. So there's a lot of work to be done, and DHS is, I think, acknowledging that, and it'll be on all the stakeholders to follow up in the coming months to see if there is improvements being made.
There are hurdles to overcome, and like many major IT initiatives, CISA continues to evolve, but it's also law. So who or what gives DHS the authority to make these changes?
Yeah, the law gave DHS the authority. It helped codify them as the entity for information sharing. It's worth pointing out that DHS is a civilian agency, and they like to remind private sector companies that they're not an intelligence agency if companies are skittish about sharing information with DHS. Another point I would say is that DHS has raised concerns about privacy in earlier iterations of the legislation. They raised concerns that the legislation was too much in the way of surveillance and involving other agencies. DHS wants to be the focal point. They want to own the privacy issue, and it'll be on them if this law is implemented in a heavy-handed way and not protecting privacy.
Well, it sounds as though privacy advocates have not backed off. So put this all together for us, Sean. So far, does CISA appear to be working as intended? And what should we be looking for in the months ahead?
It's hard to really tell right now if it's working as intended. CISA is designed to get agencies and private companies up to a baseline level of protection where known threats are being blocked. Still, that obviously does not block the more malicious, unknown threats. So critics of CISA say it wouldn't have helped some of the massive hacks of government agencies that we've seen in recent years. So I think it's too early to tell if how well it's working. Advocates will want to point to some sort of tangible progress, but in cybersecurity, it's often difficult to measure progress in that way. So we'll see.
You're right. It's hard to measure progress until it's too late. Sean Lyngaas, staff writer for FCW. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Morris.
Department of Veterans Affairs CIO Laverne Council appeared before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee this week. She addressed big topics like the implementation of FSMA and FTARA and investment in the VISTA system. Council also dropped a bit of a scoop. She says the agency plans to roll out a pilot program next month for new medical appointment scheduling software.
What's the current status of the MASS project?
There were two parallel processes going on for scheduling. MASS was one, and then there was also a mobile product being developed called VAR, and also updates to VISTA called VSE. VSE and VAR will start rollout next month in April nationally. They've been piloted, and they basically allow the ability to change our scheduling processes.
We'll be tracking the new software and bring you those updates right here. And that's the latest from Washington. Thanks for being with us. I'm Morris Jones. We know your week is filled with other matters. Save this half hour for us.